Greetings, everybody. Brother Dan Goodwin here, Prophet in the Spotlight. Dr. Charles Hilterbiddle sitting with us here. Doc, we got an exciting show, a show like none other.
Well, it's something you've come up with recently that seems to be exciting.
I can't take all the credit. I did get the nuts and bolts of it, but a couple of you're one of them. Something you said triggered something, got us thinking. And I told you about it at your truck, and I saw a reaction from you that I don't see very often, because you're a pretty mild-mannered. You don't jump after things.
No, I'm not like you. But that's right.
and I don't think that I do either. I mean, I think things through, but I've been dealing with this for several years, trying to figure something out, and I believe we've got it here. It doesn't mean we're right, and it doesn't mean, but
and it's not going to change whether we go to heaven or not. Amen.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
It's just a couple of little things that I found that affect the timeline that's pretty exciting. So,
well, it matches your 7,000-year-long time frame, saying God's not going to miss a second.
Yeah. And so we have like a 23-minute clip, just me with a PowerPoint here that we're going to show you. Just don't leave. It's coming right up in just a minute. But Doc, what I didn't get to in the clip was John chapter 2. Let me read. This is the marriage in Cana. And the third day, this is the first miracle Jesus did. And the third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And this is the turning the water into wine. Mm-hmm. And let's just go ahead and say it. It's not fermented wine. I promise you. Jesus did not give fermented wine to anybody.
But made it was fresh grape juice.
Yeah. So the third day is what jumps out at us.
Yes.
Here.
And it's the third day of the marriage feast.
Right.
I'm sure that probably the marriage started on the third day of the week, like almost all Jewish do, and on what we'd call Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. But it's the third day of the feast. It's the middle.
And we just discovered something
time.
Sitting here talking. We just discovered since they were out of wine, it can't be the first day of the feast. It's obvious he's talking about the third day of the feast.
Because the man in charge says, "Hey, wait a minute. Usually in the middle, they start giving the bad wine. You give the best to last." So it's the middle of the...
And so the point of this is, and something you said at the truck is what got us thinking about this, is that there's something that happens at the middle of the feast.
The middle of the feast, something happened there, and in the middle of the marriage supper, as you're going to talk about.
We're going to be at the marriage supper, and at the middle of the marriage supper,
we better get there. We'll run out of time for you.
The two witnesses are going to go out and be the witnesses at that wedding there. All right, here comes the clip. Don't miss this. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome everybody. I can't wait to share something with you here today. Pretty exciting. I have been struggling with something for years, several years, a prophecy-related thing with the timeline. God has given me, I believe, some insight on the timeline, and it's going to really get you excited here. We're not trying to be date setters. We're not trying to tell you we know when he's coming, but let me tell you, I got something big here. I shared it with Doc. I shared it with some other folks, little bits and pieces, and so far, everybody said, you're right on. This is powerful. This is amazing. I mean, Doc got excited about it the other day when I shared it with him. In fact, he helped me with something in my PowerPoint here. He's the genius with PowerPoint. When he heard this, he said, let me help you with that. This is awesome. The 7,000-year timeline. I believe I've solved the mystery that I've struggled with for many years. Let me read you a verse here, and we'll get started. In Isaiah chapter 46, let's start in verse 8. Remember this, and show yourselves men. Bring it again to mind, O ye transgressors. Remember the former things of old. Listen to the wording here. Remember the former things of old, things from the past, right? For I am God and there is none else. I am God and there is none like me. Declaring, verse 10, declaring the end from the beginning. I love that verse. Declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things which are not yet done. What is that saying there? That is saying that if you want to know how this thing ends, go back to the beginning. Is the beginning that way? I'm pointing over there. I don't know if that's the beginning or not. Maybe the beginning's over there. You know what I'm talking about. Go back to Genesis. Go back to the beginning of things. What did he mean by that? I'll tell you what he meant by that. He said go back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, the creation story. 6 days God created. The seventh day God rested, right? This is nothing new. You've heard us talk about this many times. Declaring the end from the beginning. You want to know how the world ends? Go back to the beginning. 6 days. And then God rests on the seventh day. You go to 2 Peter chapter 3. By the way, the entire chapter of 2 Peter 3 is prophetic, from verse 1 all the way to verse 18. It's prophetic. And right in the middle of that passage, and right after 7 verses talking about Genesis 1, the creation story, in 2 Peter 3, verse 8, he says, a day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. What is he saying there? He's saying that Genesis 1 and 2 are prophetic of 7,000 years of human history. So we got some slides for you here that we're going to help you with. I'm going to talk about God's 7,000-year earth, and you're going to be shocked when I get to the new stuff that I'm going to share with you here. And so let's just, that's what we're waiting for, folks. We're waiting for the shofar. You and I are waiting for that trumpet. The trump of God shall sound, the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive remain shall be caught up. So shall we ever be with the Lord. And that's the trumpet that they would have used in Bible days. We call it a shofar. I have that exact same size shofar in my office at home. And it's about that size. It's from Israel. They're pretty. It's a ram's horn is what they are. And boy, do they sound interesting. And we're waiting for that trumpet blast. It's the blessed hope. The blessed hope. Are you waiting for that blessed hope? Are you ready to meet the Lord? Are you expecting he could come tonight? We're going to help you with this. All right, let's go a little further. Here, Revelation 10:6 has something very interesting to say. And swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein. And then look what I highlighted here in red. That there should be time no longer. Did you catch that? Now, this isn't new either. I've shared this for years with folks. There's coming a time when there'll be no more time. There's coming a day when time will end. When is that day? That day is at the end of the 7,000th year. At the end of the 7,000th year, time will end, and God will usher in. And I'm talking about after the tribulation, after the 1,000-year kingdom age. At the end of the kingdom age, God ushers in a new heaven and a new earth. And that's what this verse is talking about. Time will be no more. What does that mean? That means that when God created, beginning in chapter 1 of Genesis, verse 1 and verse 2, and all the way through the chapter, when God began creation, he created this universe that we live in. I'm talking about the earth, the galaxy, the stars, as far as the eye can see, and the scope as far as the universe goes. And it seems to be never ending, right? It's created inside of time and space. And I believe this, according to Genesis 1 and 2, the 6 days of creation, 2 Peter 3:8, a day's with the Lord is 1,000 years. I believe that God created our universe to last exactly, not approximately, but exactly 7,000 years right to the second. I believe creation happened on Tishri 1 at 6 p.m., and I believe it'll end at the end of the 7,000th year on Tishri 1 at 6 p.m. Hey, if it's going to be a perfect 6,000 or 7,000 years, it has to end where it began. By the way, the old Jews believe that Rosh Hashanah, Tishri 1, they believe that that's creation day. Bishop Usher believed that. Josephus believed that. I believe that. And all right, so let's go a little further here. In this brief time that we have, we're going to talk about the 7,000-year earth that I just shared with you. We're going to try to find us on the timeline. By the way, we're very close to the 6,000th year, very close. And by the way, will God be late for the Sabbath? That 7,000th period we call the kingdom age is a giant Sabbath. God will not be late for the Sabbath, I promise you. We talk about a day as 1,000 years. I shared that with you a little bit already. When did the Old Testament actually end? We'll talk about that. And by the way, it ended at the cross. It ended after the cross. It didn't end at the birth of Christ. The New Testament did not begin in Matthew 1. The New Testament, according to Hebrews 9 and many other places, a will and testament is of no power, is of no power until the death of the testator. Okay, when did the Old Testament end? It ended after the cross, with the renting of the veil. Remember that? And an earthquake, okay? A giant sabbatical cycle. What am I talking about? 7,000 years is a giant sabbatical cycle. You know what a sabbatical cycle is, right? 7 days is a Sabbath. 7 years, the seventh year is a Sabbath. 49 years, or 7 times 7 is a giant sabbatical cycle. A 7,000-year earth is actually a giant sabbatical cycle. God's amazing with these numbers. What day was creation? I shared that already. The lessons from the Transfiguration, we may or may not get to that, but after 6 days, it says in Matthew 17, verse 1. After 6 days, what does that mean? Why did God mention after 6 days? How about after 6,000 years, he taketh the church, Peter, James, and John, the saints, apart into a mountain, the mountain of the Lord. And that was the rapture. 2 men come down. Who are they? Moses and Elijah. By the way, God just gave you the name of the 2 witnesses. It's not Enoch, it's Moses, and it's Elijah. God just told you in Matthew 17. And that's an important lesson in the Bible there. What does Stephen have all to do with this? We won't get to that one, so let's just move on here. There are many scriptures for a 7,000-year earth. We're not going to take the time. You can look at the screen, and I already gave you 2 Peter 3:8, Genesis 1, 6 days of the creative week, type of 6,000 years. Psalm 90, written by Moses, by the way. Psalm 90, verse 12, teach us the number of days. 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday. Matthew 17:1, I just quoted that to you, after 6 days or 6,000 years. Hosea 6, 1 and 2 is pretty important. This is to Israel, by the way. Come, let us return unto the Lord. He hath torn, he will heal us. He hath smitten, he will bind us up. And look what it says here, after 2 days. How about after 2,000 years? He will revive us. In the 3rd day, that's the kingdom age, he will raise us up. We shall live in his sight. Okay? Nothing new here. I've shared this before. Here's some quotes from the past. There are many people in the past that believe exactly what I'm saying about the 7,000-year earth. 150 A.D., that's a long time ago, right? 1,900 years ago, almost. Irenaeus wrote in his book Against Heresies, for the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and in 6 days created things were completed. It is evident, therefore, that they will come to an end in 6,000 years, okay? I'm not going to read all this. Lactantius, 300 A.D. He said it is necessary that the world should remain in this state 6 ages. That is 6,000 years, and then the kingdom age, 7,000 years. So he believed that, 300 A.D. Do you think either one of those guys was looking for the rapture in their day? I doubt it. Bishop Latimer wrote in the year 1552, the world was ordained to endure, as all learned men know, 6,000 years. He believed in a 7,000-year earth, all right? If that's true, would you agree with me that time is running out down here? We're getting very, if 6,000 years is it and then the kingdom age, we're pretty close, wouldn't you say? We're pretty close. By the way, our calendar is not right. We have, this is the year 2023 as of recording this. This is the month of July, we're near the end of July here. And so we are in the year 2023, but that's not right because we started the calendar, the Gregorian calendar, at the birth of Christ. So we got an extra 30 or so years, 33 and a half possibly, some people believe. We got too many years on our calendar because we started the New Testament at the birth instead of the death, right? That's common sense. Somebody goofed on that. So you got to go to the cross to figure this out. Here's a very simple timeline for you to look at. And 4,000 years in the Old Testament, right? 4 days, 4,000 years. 4 days of Genesis 1, 4,000 years, Old Testament. There's the cross right there. That's that divides the Old Testament from the New Testament. Not the birth, the death of Christ separates that. All right, then you got your 2,000-year church age here. Then we've got the rapture. And then you get your 1,000-year kingdom age. Very simple chart there, right? So let's go a little further. Here's what I have said for years. is the actual timeline, because there's 7 years missing on the Old Testament. I've said this for years. And so I got 3993 in the Old Testament and then the cross instead of 4,000. And then I've got my 2,000-year church age and then the rapture. And then here's your 7-year tribulation, which fills in the gap of the 3993, makes it total of 4,000 Old Testament, right? You're with me? And then your kingdom age, okay? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we've shared this before. This is in some of my videos. I can't dwell too long on this. But I have another scenario now. You see my little bump thing here I put in there. I now have a different way to look at this that God gave me just a few weeks ago, something I've been looking for years, and all of a sudden on a Sunday, just a week and a half ago, as of the date of this recording, God suddenly I just knew. I had it. I had the answer to the puzzle, to the mystery that I've been trying to figure out for a long time. I'm gonna change this chart a little bit. So here we go. Here's the most important thing I'm going to show you right here. We're living in a 7,000-year earth. We got 7,000 over there. That little red star, if you can see it over there, that's Tishri 1. That's 6 p.m. on day 1 of creation. It's a fall month. It's a new moon in the sky. It began at exactly 6 p.m. Tishri 1. That's when day 1 started on the calendar. Over here is another little star, if you can see it, at the end of the 7,000 years. You know what date that is? Well, if it's a perfect 7,000 years, you know what date that is. It's Tishri 1, 7,000 years at the end of the 7,000. In fact, 1 minute later would be the beginning of 7,001 years, the beginning of it. But we don't get there. A new heaven, a new earth comes there. This is the clock, the main clock you got to pay attention to. This clock never stops. This clock began with Adam. By the way, I don't believe in the gap theory. I don't believe in any of the gap theories. I don't believe in the Genesis 1 million year gap between verse 1 and 2. I don't believe it's there. It would destroy this timeline. I do not believe in the gap theory at the rapture. I don't believe there's a gap from the rapture to the tribulation. That would ruin the 7,000-year earth that God created. It wouldn't be a 7,000-year earth. And God's perfect. And he's a God of order. Okay? But there's another timeline, another gap theory people talk about. It's called the sin of Adam gap, kind of. Some people are now saying that there's a gap between creation and when Adam sinned. They're saying that they don't think time began until Adam sinned. I do not believe that. That also ruins this timeline. It doesn't fit. I believe time began at day 1 at 6 p.m. And by the way, there's time during the kingdom age. The kingdom age isn't much different than Adam's day before he sinned, but yet the clock still ticks, right? It's a 7,000 years earth from the time from the time creation started all the way to the end of the timeline, right? So this is important. This never stops. Where are we right now? We're just about to the 6,000th year. You know what that means? The kingdom's coming. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. All right, let's go a little further here. All right. Now here's the prophetic timeline, and I'm going to show you something that God gave me that changes everything. Literally changes everything. Here's what I've been trying to figure out. I've been trying to find a way for the tribulation to happen during the 2,000-year church age. In other words, I've been trying to find a way for the rapture to happen and the tribulation take place 7 years before the end of the church age. In other words, trying to fit Daniel's 70th week at the end of the 2,000 years from 1993 to 2000. And until a week and a half ago, I didn't have it. I've got it now. Now, here's our timeline. See, here's Tishri 1, 6 p.m. over there on the left. I hope you can see that okay. That's where it all began. The clock began ticking there. Now, let's go a little further with this. We have a 2,000-year period from Tishri 1 to Abraham, basically. Abraham comes along. He's the father of the Jews. And now God is going to deal through the Jewish nation. They're going to be given the scriptures. And if you want to find God, you got to get a Jew. And that Jew will show you the scriptures and lead you to God, right? Lead you to the Messiah that can save you. So there you have it. Now, somewhere around 445 BC, and by the way, this is not in scale. This is just to help you. Somewhere in Daniel's day, about 600 years before Jesus shows up on the scene, there's a decree made to restore and build Jerusalem, and it's called the 70 weeks of Daniel. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. And the decree right there begins another clock. Now remember, this clock that never stops. But this is Daniel's clock that begins ticking for 70 weeks. However, the Bible says in Daniel 9, verses 24 to 27, the Messiah is cut off in the 69th week. So let's show you that here. Jesus shows up right here. Here's the cross. That ends the 69th week, which is actually 483 years, right? So the cross cuts off Daniel's clock. This clock never stops. How many years we got now? We got 4,000 years. Are you still with me? 4,000 years here. The church age begins. Let's bring that up. Here's the church age. There it is. That's where we're at. By the way, how far are we? We're at the final sliver over here of the church age. We're at the end of this thing. We're at the time of the great apostasy. We're at the time of perilous times are here. We're in the Laodicean age, the end of the Laodicean age. Here we are. Okay, so let's go a little further with this. Boom, here's the rapture. Does the rapture happen at the end of the 2,000 years? I used to think that. I now am convinced it does not. I now am convinced that the rapture happens at the 1993 mark of the church age. And the 7-year period there, you and I are going to be where? Here's the 70 week of Daniel and the marriage supper. When the rapture happens, you and I are going to a marriage supper. Israel begins its 70th week with the Antichrist coming on the scene. Revelation 4:1's the rapture. Revelation 6 is the crowning of the Antichrist. They're going to be 2,520 days, a sabbatical cycle, 7 years. That's going to take place. Where are we? We're in heaven at the marriage supper. Now here's the thing. The rapture doesn't end the church age. This is what hit me. The rapture relocates us to heaven for what? For the marriage supper and the wedding with the Lord Jesus, our Messiah. He's going to become our groom. It doesn't happen right away. It's going to happen. A lot of people think it happens on day 3 of the 7-day marriage supper, which is 7,000 years on this clock. Right in the middle of that 7,000 years would be the consummation, the wedding. And at the end of the 7 years, after the marriage supper is over, what happens? The groom takes his bride to their new home. Where's the new home? Back to the earth for the kingdom age. Do you see what I'm saying? The 2,000 years doesn't end with the rapture. The church doesn't end with the rapture. It ends at the end of the marriage supper, which takes place in heaven, while the Jews and the 70th week of Daniel and the Great Tribulation is taking place. Wow. Hey, there's one more little tidbit here. Guess what happens right at the middle of the marriage supper? Guess what happens right at the middle of the tribulation? Those 2 witnesses that showed up at the rapture, remember Moses and Elijah show up right here? You remember in the middle of the tribulation, they're killed, they're left dead in the streets for 3.5 days? Right at the middle of the tribulation, they get up and they ascend back to heaven. You know why? Because they're the 2 witnesses. Yes, they're the 2 witnesses to Israel, but guess what else they are? They're the 2 witnesses at the wedding in heaven. Do you see that? Listen, a Jewish wedding, you've got to have 2 witnesses. You've got to have 2 witnesses for that marriage to take place. They're going to come up to heaven, and they're going to be the 2 witnesses at the wedding between Christ and his church. And then at the end of the marriage supper, by the way, it's very possible that Satan tries to get in. The guy with the wrong attire, he's not let into the wedding. Remember, in the middle of tribulation, Satan's cast out of heaven. He's cast down to the earth. That happens right there too, right in the middle of our marriage supper. He could be the guy that tried to get in with the wrong attire on. And all right, so I hope this is a help to you. This chart. And here's the kingdom age here. We're coming back to dwell there, and that's. I know I went a little fast here, and I hope you got. There's a lot more to this that we'll give at a later date, and we don't even have it all yet. There's more to come. This is exciting stuff. Listen, Jesus is coming back. He's going to take us out. One more thing. The cross is 30 A.D. It's 30 A.D. 2,000 years from 30 A.D. is what? 2030 AD. Do you see that? It sure looks like this could be the year, doesn't it? I'm not saying it is. If Jesus died in 30 AD, and that's a big if, and if the clock hasn't been messed with and we're really in the year 2023, then we are 7 years from 2030. We are 7 years from the 2000th year. Isn't that pretty significant? That would mean if God's going to keep time properly and the kingdom's coming where he says he's coming soon. Because we're right now we're right now 7 years out. All right, well, I hope this excites you. I hope it's interesting for you. Until next time, stand by. We'll be back into the studio with Doc with a few closing words. All right, Doc, that's there it is. Now, I got to the end of it there, and I hadn't quite.
Well, they'll be calling you a heretic, but that's okay.
Yep. But let's talk a little bit about the 30 AD when Jesus died on the cross. We think. No one knows for sure. We got some pretty good guesses, though.
We've got some guesses.
If that's right, though, if he died in 30 AD, and the calendar hasn't been messed with, and this really is 2023, then we're 7 years right now from the kingdom.
It could well be, but we ought to understand no calendar is absolutely concrete.
Yep.
And are we talking about a Jewish calendar? Are we talking about the Julian calendar? Or are we talking about maybe a God's divine calendar? Are we talking about a prophetic calendar?
And I got more to come on this. That they're all in there.
Yeah.
Daniel's 70 weeks or 360-day years, no doubt about that.
But it's an understanding that I believe that God's not going to miss any seconds.
Yeah.
And we're just simply saying this is something to consider. We're not saying you have to agree with us or not.
The marriage supper, I'm convinced now the marriage supper is part of the church age. Because
at the end of that, he's coming back with the Lamb's wife.
Yeah. And I didn't get time, but Revelation 19 tells the whole story.
That's it. That's at the end of the marriage supper.
Takes
and
her
we're coming back
to the new home, which is
He brings
here.
us back to the new home.
That's the end of the 6,000th year right there.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it's exciting for you. And remember, keep your eyes on them skies.